Trump's actual record versus the left's hysterical fantasies. If Trump was a fascist, why didn't he use military power to stay in office? The reality check moment that leaves Destiny speechless. Left-wing accusations crumble when faced with actual evidence. This debate proves who the real authoritarians are in America.
Because he's undermining his own department that's been created for him, that's supposed to have some level of independence, that's tasked with doing investigations.
Let me ask you a question. Is the President of the United States the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the United States?
I believe so.
You believe so?
Unless something's changed.
Do they have control of the entire military apparatus, essentially, as the Commander-in-Chief?
As the Commander-in-Chief, yes.
Yeah. Is that fascist?
No.
So they have basically almost unilateral control by your own metrics of the most mighty military on planet Earth. That's not accumulating enough power, centralized control to one person.
The left's favorite word, fascist, gets dismantled in this debate. Andrew Wilson exposes Destiny's empty rhetoric with one simple question. Watch Destiny squirm when asked for a concrete definition. The debate that proves the left has no substance behind their accusations. This is why conservatives are winning the battle of ideas.
Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Destiny. Destiny, can you define fascism?
I would say the two big points for fascism would be ultranationalism and authoritarianism.
Okay, what is authoritarianism?
I would say that authoritarianism is trying to centralize as much power in like a structural sense into one part of the government, and then in a broader sense it usually means undermining a bunch of liberal values that you would find like say in the
So then how is it that every part of the government which accrues more and more power to itself every single year aren't a bunch of fascists?
Because the government gaining power doesn't necessarily make it fascist. You could say there might be governmental overreach.
I'm still not even sure what is fascist here, Destiny. What is fascist? So Giovanni Gentili, we have definitions of what fascism is. We have third partyists who are out there right now who are fascist. They claim Trump is a populist. Can you tell me why they're wrong and why you're right that he's a fascist?
Well, I would have to know their...
What's up, patriots? Andrew Wilson went head-to-head with left-wing streamer Destiny in what turned out to be one of the most revealing debates I've seen in years. And let me tell you, folks, Wilson didn't just win this debate. He absolutely annihilated Destiny with cold, hard logic. What makes this debate so fascinating isn't just the verbal sparring, but how it perfectly illustrates the difference between conservative clear thinking and the liberal tendency to hide.
Exact reasons for why they reject Trump being a fascist, but I would say that Trump is a fascist because I think he's an ultra-nationalist and an authoritarian.
These are your claims.
I'm not claiming anything that those people said. I've given you my definition for fascist. I gave the two parts. I can explain them what people want.
So let's start with ultra-authoritarian.
Well, I said ultra-nationalist and authoritarian.
What is ultra-nationalism?
So I think ultra-nationalism is when you engage in a hardcore protectionist ideology that usually involves shutting yourself out from the rest of the world. That could be in forms of international affairs like military conflicts, and it could be in the forms of ultra-protectionist in terms of trade and shutting down things like immigration in order to protect your own native peoples. So, oftentimes there's a heavily racialized element, but it might not have to be.
Okay, well, Donald Trump, you're not saying has a heavy racialized element, are you?
I'm ambivalent. I don't really care on that much. I think that he qualifies or satisfies the term without that. But
okay, so let's dive into this real quick.
Behind vague terminology and shifting definitions, in today's episode, I'm going to break down exactly why Wilson's approach was so devastatingly effective and what we can all learn from his debate tactics. Before we dive in, make sure you smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you never miss our take on the political battles that matter. This channel is growing fast because we're not afraid to speak the truth, and today's analysis is the perfect example of why our perspective matters.
Some type of policies which benefit the United States over all other nations, is he a fascist?
No.
Well, I'm still confused as to what makes Trump a fascist.
That's because I had two parts of that, and you missed the authoritarian one.
Yeah,
what you described there before was just like protection.
Well, when you said authoritarian, what is he doing, which is accumulating all power to himself?
So he's trying to centralize power in the executive branch of the government, and specifically in the presidential part of the government, of the executive branch.
How?
How Donald Trump thinks that he should be able to unilaterally make decisions up and down all of the different departments and offices that exist in the executive branch.
Let's start with the core issue that exposed Destiny's entire argument. His inability to define fascism, a term the left loves to throw around like confetti at anyone they disagree with. When Wilson directly asks Destiny to define fascism, what happens? Destiny gives this nebulous, meandering explanation involving ultranationalism and authoritarianism, two more vague terms that could mean almost anything depending on who's interpreting them. This is textbook leftist debate strategy, folks. They start with emotionally charged labels like fascists, but when pressed to provide concrete definitions, they retreat into academic-sounding jargon that's deliberately designed to be flexible, enough to apply to almost any political opponent. Wilson brilliantly exposes this tactic by asking Destiny to move from abstractions to specifics. What exactly makes Trump a fascist? What specific actions constitute authoritarianism? And here's where Destiny's argument begins to crumble. The left, uses this definition shell game constantly. They know that if they can keep the conversation at the level of vague concepts rather than specific policies and actions, they can maintain the illusion that conservatives are somehow dangerous extremists. It's intellectual dishonesty at its finest, and Wilson calls it out masterfully. Now, here's where Wilson delivers perhaps the most devastating blow of the entire debate. After Destiny claims that fascism involves centralizing power, Wilson points out that the President of the United States is already the commander-in-chief of the most powerful military force on the planet. This is such a brilliant move because it uses Destiny's own definition against him. If centralizing power is the hallmark of fascism, then the constitutional office of the presidency itself would be fascist by definition. The president literally has nuclear launch codes and command authority over the entire military apparatus. Wilson's point exposes the absurdity of Destiny's definition. By Destiny's own logic, every single US president, including Biden and Obama, would qualify as fascist. This reveals something fundamental about the left's rhetorical strategy. Don't actually care about logical consistency. They only care about having flexible terminology they can selectively apply to their political opponents. What's particularly telling is Destiny's reaction. Rather than addressing this glaring contradiction in his argument, he tries to pivot and change the subject. This is what happens when someone who trades in vague accusations meets someone who deals in logical principles.
Use executive orders all the time.
That's not what an executive order is.
Presidents unilaterally make decisions all the time.
No, they don't?
Yes, they do.
No,
they do. They use executive orders all the time.
An executive order doesn't mean that you are taking power away from the departments and offices that have been created.
Right, so where's the fascism here?
Would you like me to give you specific examples?
Yes, give me the specific example.
Sure. So when Donald Trump didn't like the answer that he was getting from his attorney general because he was trying to direct the Department of Justice to do investigations or to fabricate claims, that would be an example of trying to centralize power just to the president because he's undermining his own department that's been created for him that's supposed to have some level of independence, that's tasked with doing investigations.
Let me ask you a question. Is the President of the United States the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the United States?
I believe so.
You believe so?
Unless something's changed.
Do they have control of the entire military apparatus, essentially, as the Commander-in-Chief?
As the Commander-in-Chief, yes.
Yeah. Is that fascist?
Destiny then tries to salvage his argument by bringing up Trump's supposed attempt to control the Department of Justice, claiming this proves his authoritarian tendencies. But here's where the left's hypocrisy is fully exposed. Where was this concern for executive overreach when the Biden-Harris administration was weaponizing the DOJ against their political opponents? Where was the outrage when Trump himself was facing politically motivated prosecutions? The simple fact is that the left doesn't actually care about the principle of separation of powers. They only pretend to care when Republicans are in office. When Democrats control these institutions and use them against conservatives, suddenly, there's no problem with centralizing power. Wilson points out this double standard brilliantly. He forces Destiny to confront the reality that by his own definition, the political side he supports engages in far more fascist behavior than Trump ever did. Trump may have complained about DOJ decisions, but
no.
So they have basically almost unilateral control by your own metrics of the most mighty military on planet Earth. That's not accumulating enough power, centralized control to one person. It's the fact that he tried to slay some fucking electors. Really?
So the president being the commander-in-chief is specifically laid out in the Constitution. That's an authority granted to him. I don't know what's fascist about that.
Well, because you said it's ultra power. It's this idea of having central power.
Military,
if you have the central power,
I didn't ever bring that up for him. But
if you have the central power of the most mighty military on planet Earth and the codes to the largest nuclear armament on planet Earth, you already have all of the central.
Biden-Harris administration actually used the DOJ as a weapon against political opponents. This is why debates like this are so valuable. They force leftists to either admit their hypocrisy or reveal that their accusations were never made in good faith to begin with. One of the most revealing aspects of this debate is how Destiny responds when cornered by logic instead of honestly. Engaging with Wilson's points, he resorts to playing dumb, pretending not to understand the clear contradiction Wilson has exposed. This is classic bad faith debate tactics. When a leftist commentator realizes they've been caught in a logical trap, they suddenly become very literal, pretending they can't follow the argument and demanding explanations for obvious connections. We see this when Wilson points out the contradiction between Destiny's concern about centralizing power and the inherent power of the presidency. Instead of addressing the substance of the point, Destiny pretends not to understand the connection and asks irrelevant questions about how nuclear codes help direct the Department of Justice. This is intellectual dishonesty in its purest form. It's a way to avoid admitting that your argument has been dismantled, and Wilson doesn't let him get away with it. He calmly continues to press the point, exposing Destiny's evasive tactics for what they are. This pattern of bad faith engagement isn't unique to Destiny, it's endemic to leftist debate tactics. When facts and logic aren't on your side, confusion, and misdirection become your only options. Let's take a step back and consider the broader context of this debate. For years, the left has been pushing the narrative that Trump is some kind of unique threat to democracy, a fascist who wants to destroy American institutions and rule as a dictator. But what does Trump's actual record show? Despite having control of the military as commander-in-chief, he never attempted to use it to maintain power. Despite the left's hysteria about the end of democracy, Trump peacefully left office after the 2020 election, regardless of his personal feelings about the outcome. This is the point that Wilson alludes to, and it completely demolishes Destiny's argument. If Trump were truly the fascist dictator the left portrays him as, wouldn't he have used his considerable constitutional powers to remain in office? The fact that he didn't speaks volumes. Meanwhile, as Wilson points out, it's actually been the Biden-Harris administration that has taken unprecedented steps to use government agencies against political opponents, from the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago to the multiple prosecutions of Trump himself. We've seen a level of political weaponization of government that truly is concerning from a constitutional perspective. The left's selective outrage reveals that their concerns about fascism and authoritarianism were never sincere. They're simply political weapons to be deployed against conservatives, while ignoring far more problematic actions from their own side.
Really?
Yeah.
How do the nuclear codes help you direct your Department of Justice?
Okay, I'm sorry. Is he the commander-in-chief of the United States Armed Forces?
Are you just arguing that he's the commander? I already agree with you. I don't know why you keep arguing.
What I'm arguing to you is
I'm asking you, how does the commander-in-chief use the military to make...
It's your claim.
I can ask whatever you want.
About your claim, and your claim is...
How does that make him control the DOJ? How does the military help him control the DOJ?
So, back up. That is the most powerful position I can think of for you to be in.
What makes Wilson's performance in this debate so effective is his methodical, principled approach, rather than getting emotional or resorting to personal attacks. He systematically dismantles Destiny's arguments by asking clear, direct questions, and following the logical implications to their conclusion. This is a debate strategy all conservatives should study and adopt. Wilson doesn't allow Destiny to hide behind vague terminology. He forces him to provide concrete definitions and examples, and then shows how those definitions either don't apply to Trump or would apply equally to Democratic presidents. Wilson also maintains his composure throughout, even when Destiny tries to deflect and evade. This calm, reasoned approach is far more effective than matching the emotional rhetoric of the left. It allows the audience to see clearly who is operating in good faith and who is not. Most importantly, Wilson stays focused on principles rather than personalities. He's not interested in scoring cheap points or engaging in ad hominem attacks. He's interested in exposing the logical inconsistencies in Destiny's worldview, and he does so masterfully. This debate also highlights something profoundly broken about our media landscape. Left-wing commentators like Destiny can throw around terms like fascist and authoritarian, with virtually no pushback from mainstream outlets. These accusations are treated as reasonable political discourse rather than the inflammatory, baseless smears they often are. Meanwhile, conservatives who point out actual instances of government overreach or abuse of power are dismissed as conspiracy theorists or extremists. The double standard couldn't be more obvious. This is why independent media platforms like ours are so crucial in today's information environment. We're willing to give voice to perspectives that challenge the left's narrative monopoly. We're willing to analyze debates like this one honestly, rather than simply declaring the leftist perspective the winner by default. The mainstream media would never highlight how thoroughly Wilson exposed the flaws in Destiny's arguments, because doing so would undermine their preferred political narrative. They'd rather pretend that accusations of fascism against conservatives are serious political analysis rather than cheap rhetorical tactics. So what can we take away from this epic debate showdown? First and foremost, it reveals the fundamental dishonesty of how the left uses loaded terms like fascist to demonize their opponents. When pressed for clear definitions and examples, their arguments fall apart under scrutiny. Second, it demonstrates the effectiveness of principled, logical debate techniques. Wilson didn't need to resort to personal attacks or emotional appeals. He simply needed to expose the contradictions in Destiny's own arguments. And finally, it reminds us why it's so important to challenge the left's narrative control. Without voices like Wilson's willing to engage directly with these accusations and expose their logical flaws, too many Americans might actually believe that conventional conservative positions amount to fascism. That's why we do what we do here at Black Coffee Podcast. We're committed to bringing you the perspectives and analysis that the mainstream media won't. We're dedicated to cutting through the rhetorical fog and getting to the logical core of today's political debates. If you found this breakdown valuable, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this video with friends who might benefit from seeing just how empty the left's rhetorical attacks really are. Until next time, this is Black Coffee Podcast, keeping it real and keeping the left accountable.